Thank you very much for joining this week's talk on the Sedra, the portion that we read in the diaspora of chukas. And it opens with the uh, enigmatic section that deals with the Pora Aduma, the red heifer. And this mitzvah was given actually in the first year after the Exodus from Egypt. And the events in the rest of the Sedra, which include the passing of Miriam, the complaint about water, and Moshe and Aaron as they have to confront the people who are complaining, and they Hashem tells them to speak. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to speak to the rock. He strikes the rock, and Moshe and Aaron are told at that point that they will not enter the land of Israel. And then after that, we have Aaron's passing, and there is also a war. That all of these events happen actually 39 years later. So very unusually, the events in this week's Sedra span a 39-year period. And the question is, why do we need to read about Para Aduma, which is really not chronologically in place at all in this week's Sedra particularly? And this is something that sheds tremendous light on the events that are going to be happening in the 39th year of the desert sojourn of the people of Israel. But more than that, I think that we can get the messages as we learn about the Para Aduma, the red heifer as it's translated, and really see how our lives at any point in time, it's got nothing to do with chronology. And we know that the Torah is not a history book, and while it does try to follow a sequence, if there is a reason, it will deviate. It is not bound to always slavishly adhere to the time order of events. And so the very fact that we have the start of our Sedra about the Paraduma really asks us to study the relevance to the events that happen after it, even though many years later, and also to apply that to our own times as we journey through our lives. And we're going to just look at the opening words of the Sedra. So that is chapter Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 19, and we'll go to verse 2. V'yikhu elecha para aduma tamima, and they will take to you, or for you, a completely red heifer. And Rashi tells us that it cannot have more than 2 black hairs on it, or just aduma tamima, shetehei tamima ba'adamimus, that it should be perfect in its redness. She'im hayuba shtei sa'aras shcharas pasula. If there were 2 black hairs in this effectively completely red cow, because if you imagine a cow is a fairly large animal, even a young one, and 2 black hairs is something really quite minuscule, but even that is going to render it possible, going to render it unfit for purpose. So this has to be, this is the first of the markers of the Paraduma. Asher ein ba mum, that has no blemish on it. Asher lo ola aleha o, that has not had a yoke, that has not been used in the service in the field. And so I'm going to stop there for a moment. And these criteria, I think, are really setting us up to contemplate what is going to be, what is classified as a chok, which is a statute, which we translate as a law that has no rational reason. There's no way that any human being can understand it, would think it necessary to have such a law in a social setting. And so this is going to be the sort of paradigm of such a law. And we'll come to it and we'll see that the part of the enigmatic process is the fact that the various steps that the Kohen has to take, that the animal, the red heifer, is slaughtered, and then it's burnt, and the ashes are mixed with water, and then this this mixture becomes something that can purify another person who has come into contact with a person who has passed away and is therefore ritually impure, tame. And so the mixture of the ashes of the para aduma are going to purify somebody who has had this contact. Yet the person who handles this mixture, the Kohen who handles this mixture, who is pure to start with, becomes impure by handling the substance. And so we have this metame tahurim, that it impurifies the pure, and mataher tameim, it purifies those who are impure. And I think that is part of the very, very challenging aspect of this whole process. How can it be that the same mixture is going to have the opposite effect on two different people? And this contrast, this kind of upside downness, who was what somebody who was impure now becomes pure, and somebody who was pure now becomes impure. And I think all of these pieces of a quite a perplexing jigsaw puzzle come together as we look at the words at the opening in the second verse and the posuk base of this chapter. And so we've got this concept of the color, first of all, pora aduma. Now we translate that as red. This is the color red. However, if you look at the word aduma, it is exactly the same actually as the word adama, which is ground, which is earth. And within the word adama, we have the word adam. And what we are going towards is this understanding that this is, although this is a red cow, there are allusions to human beings. There are allusions to Adam, to man, to the first man, and this concept of this completeness, tamima. And it is then further expanded to say asher ein bo mum, that has no blemish on it. Now, if we reflect a moment, what in this world has no blemish on it? And everyone has some kind of imperfection, has some kind of blemish, certainly as time goes on. And I think that if you want to find something or someone that is blemish free, then you have to look for the very newest, the most the pristine version. So you go for walks outside, and you go in the spring, and you see the leaves as they open up from their tight buds of the winter, and at that point the leaves are blemish free. They haven't yet been munched on by the insects, and they are perfect. They are untouched, unravaged. And I think that if we want to look for this concept of not having a blemish, we would then go to the first man, Adam Harishon, before the sin. At that pristine point, he was blemish free. And really, when we're thinking of contemplating about life, contemplating about the fact that all of us have blemishes, all of us do things that are wrong, and we are trying to recreate, go back to that time of pristine perfection of Adam Harishon, the first man before the sin. And the concept asher lo ola aleha o, that has not had a yoke, literally, if we imagine in the olden times, that the oxen used to have these wooden structures on their neck, and that was attached to the plough, and that's how they would prepare the ground for the sowing. And this is understood in a more broad sense as a burden of any description. And very interesting that the Pora Aduma, which is going to be the symbol of the forgiveness of the restoration of the person who is Tome and make him Tahor again, that this concept that the Pora Aduma must never have had a burden, an ol on it. And when we think about physical lives, the demands on our lives, the distractions, the physical distractions of our lives, then we can often feel burdened by it. And I think that this is something that reminded me that this, on the one hand, this para aduma that has never had a yoke on it, has been free and carefree, and we have the concept of anything is a burden except for accepting Ol Malchus Shamayim. When we have a wooden yoke, when we have to pull a plough in a field, that is a burden on our shoulders. But when we accept Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, that is not something that weighs heavy on our shoulders. That is something that gives us wings. That is something that lifts us up. Because when we are following the rules, the procedures, the words, the wisdom of the Torah, we are lifted up by it. And a very beautiful prayer that is in part of the morning prayers is actually called Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, which means accepting the yoke of heaven. And after an introduction, the prayer goes on to say, Ma anu, what are we? Me chayenu, what are our lives? Me chazdenu, what are our kindnesses? Ma tzidkosenu, what is our righteousness? Ma yeshuasenu, what is our salvation? Ma kochenu, what is our strength? Ma gvurasenu, what is our might? Ma no ma lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avosenu. What should we say to you, Lord our God and the God of our fathers? Hello, Chol hagibarim ka'ayin lefanecha. Are not all the mighty ones like nothing before you? V'anshe Hashem kolo hayu, and men of renown as if they have never been. V'chachomim kibli mada, and wise people as if they have no understanding. U'nevonim and the understanding kivli haskel, as if they have no intelligence. Kivro ma'asehem tohu, for many of their works are nothing. Bimei chayehem hevel lefaneha, and the days of their lives are like nothing before you, like fleeting breath before you. Umosa ha'adam min habehema ayin, and what is man over and above animals? Ki hakol hovel, because everything is fleeting breath. And I think that this concept of the accepting of Ol Malchus Shamayim, the requirements of the Torah on our shoulders, that is something that is going to infuse our lives with meaning. And the depth of the wisdom of the Parah Aduma in the Sedra of Chukas, when the people are facing life without the leaders, the three leaders, Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe Rabbeinu, who have been so central in their leaving Egypt and the last stages of being in Egypt and leaving Egypt, and then preparation for going into the land of Israel. And so this is a very shocking transition period, a very difficult adjustment as they have to contemplate the passing of these great leaders. And so looking back to the Parah Aduma, this idea that the Torah, that Hashem maktim trufa lamaka, that Hashem preempts the plague and he already has the cure in place. The cure of being able to deal with mortality, with one's own mortality, with the mortality of great leaders, with the mortality of loved ones, that is in the ritual of the Parah Aduma. at that point when somebody is so devastated, they feel that the floor has gone from under their feet, when they have this very precise ritual that they have to follow, then that is enabling them to emerge, to adjust, to, on the one hand, really understand that, yes, all human beings, all physical things tend to decay, and passing, dying is a part of living. Yet, on the other hand, not to be derailed by that, not to lose the love, awe, reverence of life, not to lose that impetus and motivation to live the best life, to live a truly good life in the sense of the Torah, that is going to actually give us that legacy, give us that existence beyond ourselves. And in connection with this, there's a very interesting Mishnah in Ethics of Our Fathers in Pirkei Avot, and that is in chapter 4, Mishnah 29. And it begins, Hu Haya Omer, he used to say, this refers to Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, Hayelodim lomos v'hamesim lehechayos. The born are destined to die, and the dead are destined to be brought back to life. V'hachayim lidon, and the living to be judged. And so I think in this Mishnah, as it continues, but I just want to point out that this, just like the Pora Aduma, had the effect of reversing that the person who was impure became pure, the person who was pure became impure. And so this kind of contrast is also seen, that the Mishnah tells us that people who are born, those who are alive now, they are destined to die, and those who are dead now are destined to come alive. And so it's this concept of what you see now is not the definitive. You are not able to understand by looking at what is in front of you, because the people who you see are alive, you think that is something that is a solid, firm fact. And the people who have passed away, again, you can't imagine them reviving. But I think the message of the Pora Aduma is picking up, is reflecting on this idea that it is more than what you see. It is more than the reality of this particular moment. And interwoven into this idea that we have to acclimatize ourselves to is this concept of being judged, that when we live, we need to live in accordance with the knowledge that our actions, our thoughts are judged by Melech Malchei Hamlochim, the King of Kings. And so we are accountable, and we are accountable to ourselves as well. As we are living, we need to be asking ourselves how we are using our time, how we are using our resources and everything that's available to us. And so I think that this is all part of the message of the Pora Aduma in this enigmatic concept of the reversal of the purification of someone who's impure and the contamination of someone who was originally tahor. And so we have that aspect. We have the link with a Pora Aduma, with Adam Harishon, with the first man, with that pristine state before the sin. That is something that we are striving during our lives as we are trying to live our best life. And the words and the process of the Pora Aduma, I believe, link up to the stories that we read about, to the events in Bereshis at the very beginning. And if we go to chapter 19, verse 13, we have this concept of the person who goes through the process. He has to have Mei Nida on him as part of the purification process. and this is translated as waters of purification, sprinkling water. And the word nida is also referred to as the menstrual flow, as when a woman has her period, then after her period, she needs to then wait 7 days, and she is considered a nida during that period, during that time. But it actually is very interestingly connected to the events that happen when Cain kills his brother Abel, and the punishment that is given to him, or the consequence of that, is that, and I'll read that's Bereshit chapter 4, verse 14. Okay. No, it's actually verse 12. So it's chapter 4, verse 12 in Bereshit. And Cain is told, Ki sa'avod es ha'adama, you will work the land, lo sosif teis kocho loch. The earth, the Adama, we've just come from Aduma and Adama, but that earth is not going to continue to give its strength to you. Na vanod tihye ba'aretz. You will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the face of the earth. And this word nud is also connected to the word nida. And the Rabbi Foreman points out that this sense of isolation is something that a person experiences when they are in a state of ritual, when they are tameh, and this is something that is the consequence when Cain kills his brother, and very appropriately, then his brother is called Hevel, translated into English as Abel. But this word Hevel that I actually read in this in the prayer of the accepting the Ol Malchus Shemayim, the sovereignty of heaven, says Hakol Hevel, and Rabbi Sachs Zatzal translates Hevel as fleeting breath. So in the Para Aduma, in the process of the Para Aduma, we are given the tools to understand that although life is fleeting breath, although we have to ask, what are we? What is going to happen? What is happening while we are alive? What is going to happen after we pass? And if we're all fleeting breath, what does everything mean? And that is something that we must learn to live with and not be pulled down by, and to, while acknowledging and living, knowing that we all walk Begay Salmovis, that we are all destined at the appropriate time to pass. But that is something that cannot cloud our lives and cannot detract from our mission, cannot take away our energy. And that is something that requires great effort, because it is a very shocking experience, and it should not lose its shock. The passing of a human being is something of great significance. It's not, oh yes, it happens to everybody and that's part of life. Yes, it does happen to everybody, and yes, it is part of life, but it's not ever something that we should be blasé about on the one hand, yet on the other hand, we don't want to let it demoralize us and sap us of our life because of the effect that contemplating these matters have. And the wisdom of the Para Aduma, the wisdom of the ritual, and the emergence of the person from a state of tameh into tahor, these are things that help us cope, helped the generation of the wilderness who were going to face the challenges that are outlined in the following psukim in this week's Sedra. But however many years later, for eternity, This is something that goes to the core of our lives and gives us tools to really